Clara Dain heard Alpha King Felix Harrow begin her funeral while she was still breathing. His voice crossed the sealed stone between Hollowmoon infirmary and the mourning howl chamber, weakened by distance but unmistakable. My mate endured pain without asking the pack to carry it for her. Clara lay on a narrow cot in an isolation ward that official records declared entirely empty. A fever cloth had dried against her throat, her lungs burned with every deep breath. A quarantine cistern still fed the basin, but food and medicine had stopped when the death notice was filed. No healer had entered for 3 days. She pressed her palm against the wall. Felix. The stone returned only the vibration of his voice. The mourning howl chamber shared the infirmary's oldest foundation, carrying the pack's final call through sealed stone. Clara had no ashes. She had no coffin. Chief Scribe Emmett Core had produced a sealed cremation certificate, a quarantine death notice, and a transfer record claiming her body had been removed through the plague passage before dawn. First Plague law barred even an Alpha King from entering a sealed ward. It did not bar a living witness check through the observation grill. Felix had demanded none. Inside the chamber, ceremonial bells sounded 3 slow notes. Clara counted them through the wall. Felix continued. She knew the limits of her body. She never allowed those limits to diminish her loyalty. Clara closed her eyes. He had used those words after carrying her from the winter courtyard when her legs failed. That night, he had challenged every healer who spoke as though weakness made her absent. Now he praised her endurance at a funeral he had permitted without seeing her face. A second voice entered the chamber. Emmett, Your Majesty, the final declaration must be read before the mourning howl. Felix's reply was low. You have read enough declarations. The pack requires legal closure. Quarantine deaths cannot remain unconfirmed during an active outbreak. They were confirmed by men who would not let me enter. The seal protected the kingdom. It protected everyone except Clara. For one breath, hope rose inside her. Then Emmett said, breaking quarantine would have exposed the royal wolf, the council, and every mourning household. She would not have wanted her death to endanger them. Clara's fingers curled against the stone. Emmett had always spoken about her wishes most confidently when she was too ill to answer. Felix said nothing. A parchment unfolded beyond the wall. Emmett read clearly. Clara Dain, royal mate to Alpha King Felix Harrow, declared deceased at the 9th night bell under plague seal authority. Personal residence reverted to the crown. Household protections concluded. Mate bond status entered as severed by death. Clara felt the bond inside her chest react. A thin silver egg pulled beneath her ribs, reaching toward Felix on the other side of the wall. It had not severed. For 3 nights, the plague seal above her door had warmed whenever Felix's royal wolf stirred. Then the bond was dragged from her in punishing waves to quiet it. She had thought Felix was searching for her. Now she understood he had been mourning. In the chamber, Felix spoke again. Who witnessed the severing? The infirmary registrar and 2 plague healers. I asked for their names. They remain sealed until the outbreak closes. And the body? Transferred before sunrise under cremation law. You gave me an urn I was forbidden to open. Moon, plague, survives in wolf, ash, and bond residue until the final moon. Clara dragged herself upright. The room tilted. Her knees struck the floor before she reached the wall. Beyond it, Felix said, I should have seen her. Emmett's tone softened. You could not enter without risking the pack. I could have ordered the grill opened. The death was already certified. I should have seen her. Clara pressed her forehead to the cold stone. That was the wound she could not turn into misunderstanding. Felix had been bound by the seal, but not silenced by it. He had accepted the records before exhausting the lawful proof still available to him. The first morning bell rang. Inside the chamber, hundreds of wolves lowered their heads. Felix began the ceremonial call. His howl entered the wall like grief given a body deep, royal, and raw enough to wake every sleeping bond in Hollowmoon. The pack answered him. The ancient stone gathered every voice and carried it through the infirmary foundation. Clara tried to stand. Her first breath collapsed into a cough. The second produced no sound. The morning call began to fade. Clara struck the wall with her palm. Once. Twice. No one stopped howling. She remembered Felix teaching her how to call through pain after illness, weakened her first adult shift. Do not force the throat. Give the wolf whatever breath remains. Clara placed both hands against the stone. The plague seal warmed. The mate bond pulled again, drawing strength from her chest toward Felix's royal wolf. She closed herself around it. For the first time, she refused to let the bond take without carrying her voice with it. Clara lifted her face. Her howl emerged, broken, thin, and painfully human at its edges. But it crossed the wall. The pack's mourning call stopped. In the sudden silence, Clara's answer sounded again from behind the sealed infirmary stone. Felix ended the mourning rite before Clara's second howl had finished crossing the stone. Open the observation grill. Chief Scribe Emmett Core remained beside the sealed death notice. Your Majesty, plague resonance can imitate a familiar voice. The chamber has carried mate echoes before. Felix turned toward him. From an empty ward, bond residue may persist after death. Then the living witness procedure will prove it. Opening even the observation grill requires an independent plague authority. None is present inside the chamber. Bring one. The nearest examiner is across the river. Then the funeral waits. The legal declaration has already been read. Felix looked toward the wall. The declaration just answered us. He ordered the mourning howl chamber sealed as an evidence site. No ash urn, death notice, transfer record, or witness register could leave under scribal authority. Emmett folded his hands. You are suspending plague law on the strength of a sound. I am using the verification plague law allowed before this funeral began. She remained on her knees beside the wall, one hand pressed beneath her ribs. The seal above the ward door had warmed again. Felix's royal wolf was rising in response to the answering howl, and the bond pulled at her with it. She tried to call once more. Only breath reached her throat. Felix struck the chamber wall with his palm. Clara. She closed her eyes. He knew now. Knowing after the eulogy did not return the 3 nights in which food and medicine had stopped. It did not erase the death notice that had taken her residence, property, and legal bond while she lay within hearing distance. The independent plague examiner arrived before the final moon bell. She wore a sealed grey mantle and carried no mark from Felix's court. 2 oath healers accompanied her to preserve the witness chain. Emmett met them at the infirmary passage. The ward was certified empty after transfer. The examiner studied the door. Who performed the living witness check? The death was confirmed by the infirmary registrar and 2 plague healers. That was not my question. Emmett's expression remained calm. The observation grill was not opened after the death declaration. Felix stood several paces behind the quarantine line. Open it now. The examiner inspected the outer latch, washed it in bitter moon salt, and broke the small wax tab beneath the grill. The outer shutter, lifted less than the width of a hand. Sealed plague glass remained between the corridor and the ward. A grey eye appeared beyond it. Can you hear me? The examiner asked. Clara dragged herself toward the door. Yes. The speaking channel carried the word thinly through the glass. The examiner's face changed, though her hands remained steady. State your name. Clara Dain. State the last thing you remember before isolation. Emmett's clerk brought a transfer sheet. I refused to sign it. Emmett stepped closer. A fevered patient may confuse time and identity. Clara reached the grill. She could see Felix behind the examiner. He looked as though the funeral had hollowed him from within. Ask him, Clara whispered, what he said when I could no longer stand in the winter courtyard. Felix moved toward the quarantine line. The examiner raised one hand. Do not cross. He stopped. Clara watched that obedience with bitter clarity. Felix said, I told her weakness did not make her absent. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the grill. And today? His face went still. Today, I allowed records to make you absent. Emmett said, Your Majesty, this conversation must wait until medical status is confirmed. No, Clara said. The examiner leaned closer. Save your strength. Clara kept her eyes on Felix. He may wait for forgiveness. He will not wait for the truth. The examiner ordered the ward reopened only through the plague service passage. Felix was required to remain beyond the second containment line, while Clara was carried out on a sealed litter. When the inner door opened, the smell of stagnant water and fever reached the service passage. Felix took one step forward. The oath healer blocked him. You cannot touch her. Clara's eyes opened as the litter passed. His hand lifted, then fell before reaching the quarantine veil. I was deceived, he said. She turned her face toward him. You were given false records. His jaw tightened. That is what I meant. No, you meant the lie, explains the funeral. He said nothing. Clara's voice weakened, but each word remained clear. The lie belongs to whoever wrote it. The funeral belongs to the man who did not ask to see me breathe. Felix lowered his head. The examiner placed the death notice, cremation certificate, transfer sheet, and sealed urn under independent custody. Clara's death declaration was suspended immediately. Her identity, medical classification, and the origin of the records remained under review, while every property transfer and mate bond termination was stayed. As the healers moved her toward the clean ward, Clara arched against the litter. The plague seal above the old door had warmed again. A silver strain passed beneath her skin and pulled toward Felix. His royal wolf answered from the corridor with a low, involuntary growl. The independent examiner reached up and pressed 2 fingers to the seal. Her expression hardened. This carries no containment mark. Felix looked at her. What does it carry? She traced the hidden order beneath the quarantine wax. A royal wolf calming command. The command named the wolf it was meant to calm. It did not name the hand that had written it. The independent examiner sealed Clara's former ward and moved the altered plague seal to an evidence frame without breaking the wax. Clara remained in a clean isolation room across the corridor, feverish beneath a grey quarantine blanket. Felix stood beyond the second containment line. He could see her through plague glass. He could not reach her. The examiner studied the hidden command. A royal wolf calming order may be issued during an emergency surge, she said. If bonded strength is transferred, it requires the source's consent, a healer's necessity mark, and either the king's signature or a named regent's authority. Felix looked at the seal, which are present. The target is identified as your wolf. Emergency authority is claimed. And the rest? No healer's necessity mark. No consent from Clara. No named issuer. Emmett Core remained beside the evidence table under oath healer supervision. Emergency plague conditions permit abbreviated notation. Abbreviated does not mean anonymous, the examiner said. Clara turned toward the speaking channel. When was the seal replaced? Her voice was rough enough that the examiner ordered water before answering. The outer wax is 3 days old. The door was sealed 6 days ago. Felix's attention sharpened. Someone altered the outer order after quarantine began, or replaced it without breaking containment, Emmett said. Both can be lawful. Then there will be an access record, Clara replied. The examiner ordered Hollowmoon Infirmary's door register, seal ledger, and medical chart brought under independent custody. Felix watched Clara lift the cup with both hands. You should rest. She looked through the glass. You rested your questions until my funeral. He did not answer. The door register arrived first. It recorded the original quarantine order 6 nights earlier. 2 plague healers entered during the first 3 days. A food attendant delivered broth through the service hatch. On the 4th morning, Clara was marked, transferred. After that entry, food and medicine stopped. The observation grill had never been opened. Felix read the line twice. Who entered the transfer? Chief Scribal Office, the examiner said. Emmett spoke evenly. My office records certified movement. We do not carry patients. Who certified the body left this room? Felix asked. The infirmary registrar and 2 plague healers. Name them. Emmett looked toward the examiner. Their identities remain protected during active outbreak review. They are witnesses in a false death declaration, she said. Their names are evidence. The seal ledger identified the healers by duty mark. The registrar's line carried only an office stamp. Clara closed her eyes briefly. The clerk who brought me the transfer sheet wore that stamp. Many clerks use the registrar's office mark, Emmett said. And how many bring unsigned transfer sheets to women too weak to stand? That must be determined from the register. The medical chart arrived last. Clara had entered Hollowmoon with fever, joint weakness, and irregular shifting. 2 moon plague tests had been ordered. Only one result appeared. Inconclusive. Felix looked toward the clean ward. You were declared plague, dead, without a confirmed result. First, plague law permits clinical classification when waiting for a second test risks the pack, Emmett said. The examiner kept reading. The second sample was collected. Then where is the result? Clara asked. No one answered. During the 3 nights after the outer seal was replaced, each rise in Clara's fever matched an episode of aggression in Felix's chambers. Clawing at the restraint doors, failure to recognize the royal guard, attempts to break the mate-wing boundary. Within the same quarter hour, Clara's pulse collapsed. Felix looked at the dates. I was told the calming drafts were working. The examiner touched the evidence frame with a gloved finger. Something was working. Clara's gaze stayed on Felix. You never felt the bond pull? I felt it quiet after each surge. And you did not ask what it was taking from. I thought the infirmary had dampened the bond for your protection. Did you ask to see the order? No. Emmett turned toward the examiner. Correlation does not prove extraction. A distressed mate may react naturally to the royal wolf. Then why route a calming command through her plague seal? Clara asked. The command is present. Its purpose remains under investigation. The examiner marked the chart and royal wolf log as linked evidence. She examined the wax composition. The outer layer contained quarantine resin. Beneath it lay silver bark ash, used only for commands affecting bonded royal wolves. Felix looked at Emmett. Who had access to that material? Royal healers, plague sealers, and the chief scribal office during emergency record work. Your office. Among others. The examiner opened the emergency authorization ledger. One entry matched the date Clara's outer seal had been replaced. Royal wolf stabilization required during mate quarantine. Authority invoked. Emergency crown protection. The line for the issuing officer was blank. Felix stepped closer to the containment boundary and stopped. Where is my signature? The examiner turned the ledger toward the witnesses. It is not present. Clara watched him through the glass. The calming command had been entered under Royal Emergency Authority. The authorization line carried no king's signature. The missing signature did not clear Felix. It proved that Crown authority could be invoked without requiring his hand, and that no person had accepted responsibility for invoking it. The independent examiner kept the emergency authorization ledger open. Clara remained behind plate glass, feverish beneath a gray blanket. Felix stood beyond the second containment line. Who may invoke emergency crown protection without the king's signature? He asked. A named regent, during incapacity, the senior royal healer, during immediate risk to the king's life, or a registered continuity office, during a threat to succession stability. Emmett Core folded his hands. The royal wolf's collapse would qualify. Clara's voice crossed the speaking channel. My body did not become public property because his wolf was frightened. No lawful order says that it did, the examiner replied. A continuity office may authorize stabilization. It may not waive the bonded source's consent. Felix looked at the blank issuer line. Was a consent form filed? The examiner requested the emergency attachment register. One consent number had been entered beside the calming command. The corresponding space in Clara's medical file was empty. Emmett examined the number. An attachment may have remained in continuity custody during quarantine. Then continuity custody will produce it, Clara said. Felix looked through the glass. You should not have to argue this from a sick bed. You should not need me well before you believe the absence matters. The examiner ordered the emergency authority book, continuity custody list, and seal release record brought from Crown administration. The missing plague test remains evidence, she said. This inquiry is limited to who could issue the calming command. Emmett inclined his head. A proper limit. The seal release record arrived under 2 oath healer marks. Emergency crown protection had been invoked 6 times during Felix's reign. 5 entries carried his signature, or the named authority of the senior royal healer. The 6th matched Clara's altered ward seal. No king's signature. No healer's necessity mark. No named regent. Felix read the entry. Who held the emergency seal that night? Released to a registered continuity office at the 7th night bell. Returned before dawn. Named custodian? Office authority only. Emmett spoke calmly. Continuity offices act institutionally. Individual names may be withheld during a threat involving the royal wolf. May be withheld from the public, the examiner said, not from the sealed custody record. The inner record contained a receipt number but no personal mark. Clara shifted beneath the blanket, a tremor passing through her hands. Was silver bark cash released with the seal? 1 measured packet. Purpose: royal. Wolf stabilization during mate quarantine. Felix looked toward Emmett. Who requested it? The same continuity authority. That is an office title again. It remains lawful if the office held registered emergency power, Emmett said. Lawful authority does not create Clara's consent. No, Emmett replied. But if the royal wolf threatened the pack, delaying stabilization might have caused mass harm. Clara leaned toward the speaking channel. You keep describing the danger his wolf posed. The record describes what someone took from me. The issuing hand remains unknown. The missing hand does not make the taking smaller. The examiner entered the statement into the inquiry. Felix looked at Clara through the glass. I felt the wolf settle. And you were relieved. Yes, relief is not guilt. No. But you accepted it without asking where it came from. Yes. Emmett turned to the examiner. The king's lack of inquiry is morally relevant. It does not identify the issuing office. Agreed. She opened the registry of delegated emergency powers. No regency had been active during Clara's quarantine. The senior royal healer had transferred his Hollowmoon emergency seal before leaving for the southern outbreak. The registry marked him outside local jurisdiction and named no acting healer in his place. Felix pointed to the remaining category. Registered Continuity Office. Another pull passed beneath Clara's ribs. Her pulse dropped, and the oath healer adjusted the monitoring cord without crossing the glass. The examiner ordered Felix move to the infirmary's wolf-dampening room and placed his royal wolf under non-bonded calming drafts. Reduce every surge at the target, she said. We cannot remove the command yet, but we can stop feeding it fresh demand. Felix stepped back from the containment line. Can the residual command be severed? Not until we reconstruct the full command structure. Breaking it blindly could drive the stored force back through Clara. And the issuing authority? We need that to recover the consent record, necessity basis, and original order. It is an accountability question, not the release mechanism. Then move me wherever the wolf can do her least harm. You are already being moved. Felix did not resist the oath guards. I will not order another risk to her body. Clara opened her eyes. That choice belongs to me when the evidence is complete. Yes. The examiner placed the emergency registry beside the blank authorization line. Emergency crown protection could be invoked without the king only by one registered office. The ledger named the Office of Royal Continuity. The Office of Royal Continuity had authority to protect the succession. It did not have authority to erase the person whose bond it used. The independent examiner moved the inquiry to Hollowmoon Infirmary's sealed record room. Clara remained behind plate glass, while Felix was confined to the wolf-dampening chamber at the opposite end of the corridor. Non-bonded drafts slowed his royal wolf. They did not stop Clara from trembling whenever the residual command tightened. Emmett Core stood beside the continuity roster. The office does not report through the chief scribal chain, he said. My clerks record its emergency actions after they are issued. Record, review, or authorize? Clara asked through the speaking channel. Record. In succession matters, my office may also certify that the stated threat falls within continuity law. That sounds like review. It is legal classification, not command authority. The examiner marked the distinction. The personnel roster listed 5 continuity officers. Only one had been assigned night duty when Clara's outer seal was altered. The name was hidden beneath an emergency privacy code. Felix's voice came through the dampening room channel. Open the sealed identity. Emmett looked toward the examiner. The code may be broken only if the Emergency Act is directly connected to bodily harm or false succession reporting. Clara's pulse record lay beside the altered seal. The examiner broke the code. The night duty officer was not Emmett. He was a continuity registrar attached to the Crown Archive, currently absent under outbreak quarantine. Felix said, "Can he be questioned?" "Not until an independent examiner confirms access," she replied. "His absence is not evidence of guilt." Clara shifted against her pillows. Who held the emergency seal? The custody roster showed that the continuity registrar requested it. A separate hand received it from Crown administration. That hand was identified only as continuity courier. No personal name again, Felix said. The courier role was permitted to use a rotating office mark, Emmett answered. It protected staff handling threats to the royal line. It also prevents the record from showing who carried the seal to my ward, Clara said. Yes, the examiner replied. That protection now obstructs accountability. She ordered the courier rotation list sealed for comparison. The silverbark materials register came next. One measured packet had been released at the same 7th night bell as the emergency seal. Requester, Office of Royal Continuity. Certified purpose. Stabilization of the royal wolf during mate quarantine. Receiving mark, continuity courier. Emmett studied the entry. The request falls within the office's delegated authority. The authority required Clara's consent, Felix said. Yes. Where is it? The examiner turned to the attachment number recorded beside the command. Continuity custody showed that an attachment had entered the office archive. It had not been transferred into Clara's medical file. Clara leaned toward the channel. Was the attachment created before the seal was altered? The index gives only the filing time. Then read it. The examiner did not open the attachment. First, we established chain of custody. She traced the document from continuity intake to scribal certification. The chief scribal office had received a summary stating that bonded source consent was present. Felix looked toward Emmett through the corridor glass. Your office certified that summary. We certified that the required attachment number existed, Emmett said. We did not witness Clara sign it. Did you request the original? Emergency summaries are accepted when the continuity seal is valid. Clara's voice remained weak. So one office claimed my consent, and another certified the claim without seeing me. Yes, Emmett said. The answer carried no apology. The examiner continued. Certification does not prove authorship. It proves the chief scribal office allowed the command to proceed without independently confirming the source's consent. Felix spoke from the dampening room. Suspend every Crown order that uses a mate bond as an emergency resource. Emmett turned toward the channel. That would affect royal defense protocols beyond this case. Then they will wait for consent. Some emergencies allow only minutes. Then the law should have created lawful preparation before the emergency, not ownership during it. The examiner looked toward Clara. Do you consent to temporary suspension of all new extraction orders involving your bond while this inquiry continues? Yes, Felix said. Make the order broader. No bonded source may be used without direct recorded consent and an independent healer's necessity mark. You may suspend Crown policy, the examiner replied. You may not amend medical law from confinement. Then suspend the policy and submit the amendment to the Oath Council. Clara closed her eyes briefly. You are stopping the next order. Yes. That does not change the one already inside me. No. The examiner recorded both statements. She then opened the continuity attachment under 2 healer marks. The document bore Clara Dain's name. A consent statement authorized limited bond support for 1 royal wolf surge. At the bottom appeared Clara's personal mark. Felix's breathing changed over the channel. Clara stared through the glass. I never signed that. The examiner checked the filing time. The consent attachment existed. It carried Clara Dain's mark. The mark had been entered 2 hours after she was declared dead. The forged consent mark had been entered after Clara's death declaration. The command had already been operating. The independent examiner placed the attachment beside the seal map. Posthumous filing cannot create consent, she said. At most, it records consent already witnessed. Emmett Core stood beneath the evidence lamps. Emergency officers sometimes complete attachments after an act when delay would threaten the succession. Then where is the witness statement? Felix asked through the dampening room channel. There may be one in continuity custody. Clara leaned toward the speaking channel, her face pale behind plate glass. There is no statement, because I gave no consent. The examiner marked the attachment as disputed evidence and prohibited its use in any medical or bond decision. Felix's royal wolf had been quiet for nearly an hour under non-bonded drafts. Clara's pulse had stopped collapsing, though the fever remained. The examiner turned back to the altered plague seal. We can now reconstruct the command without activating it. Felix said, Tell Clara the risks before you proceed. I will tell the patient, the examiner replied. She addressed Clara directly. The seal contains a source route from your mate bond, a target route toward the royal wolf, and a surge trigger tied to his loss of control. Reading the structure should not increase extraction. If the stored force shifts, we stop. Clara nodded. Proceed. Layer by layer, the examiner copied the command onto neutral slate. The first line identified Felix's wolf. The second named Clara's living bond as the source. The third ordered transfer whenever the royal wolf crossed a violence threshold. Emmett studied the slate. That confirms unauthorized support. It does not explain the false death records. There is another layer, the examiner said. Beneath the surge trigger lay a maintenance clause. Source must remain biologically viable. Clara's hand tightened around the blanket. Felix's voice came harshly through the channel. Read the rest. The examiner did not look at him. I will continue if Clara wishes it. Clara swallowed against the pain in her throat. Read it. The maintenance clause required enough water and basic circulation to preserve bond function. It did not require food, medicine, healer visits, or conscious participation. The silence in the record room held. Clara looked toward Emmett. My cistern kept running. Yes, the examiner said. Everything else stopped when I was declared dead. Yes. Felix struck something inside the dampening room. The sound was blunt, controlled before it became another blow. Emmett remained still. A command structure may preserve a source during emergency treatment. That does not prove anyone intended neglect. It proves the command expected a living source, Clara said. The death record said there was none. The examiner continued to the release condition. The order did not end when Clara was transferred, cremated, or legally declared dead. It ended only if Felix's royal wolf no longer required stabilization or if Clara's bond ceased functioning. Felix's breathing became audible over the channel. They could not cremate her. No, the examiner said. Not while the command depended on a living bond. Clara closed her eyes. The sealed urn had never been the end of the lie. It had given the pack an object to mourn while leaving her body available behind the wall. Emmett spoke carefully. The command and the false records may have been created by different officers for different purposes. They may have been, the examiner agreed. Authorship remains unproved. Felix said, but whoever used the command knew she had to remain alive. The structure required it. Clara opened her eyes again. And whoever stopped my food knew the record called the ward empty. That connection still requires evidence, Emmett said. She looked at him through the glass. You are correct. Do not mistake that for comfort. The examiner traced the final routing line. The plague seal had not merely hidden the calming order beneath quarantine wax. It had used Hollowmoon's containment network to carry Clara's bond strength out without requiring the ward door to open. Felix asked, Can it be stopped now? Your isolation has reduced demand. To sever the root, I must neutralize the stored force and close the target line before releasing Clara's source line. What happens if the target line opens first? The force may return through her pulse. Clara asked, What happens if mine is closed first? His wolf may take the full rebound. Felix answered before anyone else. Then let it. Clara turned toward his channel. You do not choose which body pays for this next. His silence lasted several breaths. No, he said, I do not. The examiner ordered a full release plan prepared under independent medical authority. Until Clara approved it, Felix would remain in the dampening chamber, and the command would remain inactive, but intact. Emmett looked at the disputed consent attachment. The person who filed this may have believed continued stabilization protected the kingdom. Clara's voice thinned, but did not break. Then the kingdom was protected by keeping me alive enough to use, and dead enough to ignore. The examiner uncovered the last line of the command. It was not a medical instruction. It was a continuity directive. Maintain source viability. Preserve royal wolf stability after declared death. Before dawn, Clara signed a refusal removing her mate bond from every Crown medical order. The independent examiner read each clause through the plague glass channel. Existing command structure remains in place until it can be safely released, she said, but no new surge order, extraction request, or continuity measure may use Clara as a source. Emmett Core stood beside the sealed records. Her plague status remains unconfirmed. Moving her outside Hollowmoon may endanger another infirmary. Then she will remain under independent quarantine, the examiner replied, not Crown custody. Clara held the pen between unsteady fingers. I will not return to the mate wing. Felix heard her from the wolf dampening chamber. No one will send you there. She looked toward the dark glass at the end of the corridor. That sounded like permission. It was not meant as permission. What was it? My cooperation with whatever you choose. Clara signed. The request named an oath-run infirmary beyond the palace walls. Its healers answered to the regional plague court, not the royal household. Until her second test was recovered or repeated, she would remain isolated there. Emmett examined the transfer order. The royal mate cannot be removed from protected medical custody while the bond remains attached to the king. My death notice terminated that protection without difficulty, Clara said. Do not rediscover concern now that I can answer. The death declaration has been suspended. My rooms are still sealed. My property is still frozen. My mate status remains under review. Those matters require evidence. So does keeping me here. The examiner approved the transfer. Felix asked that no royal guard enter Clara's carriage, no court healer control her treatment, and no report about her condition pass through the chief scribal office before reaching the independent inquiry. Emmett's expression did not change. You are removing the Crown from information concerning its own mate bond. Felix answered, the Crown treated her body as information and failed to treat her as a person. Clara looked down at the signed refusal. The words did not repair what he had done. They did prove he had stopped asking his authority to stand where her consent belonged. The examiner prepared Clara for transport through the plague service passage. Her fever remained high. She could sit only with support, and the effort of dressing left her breathing shallow. A healer brought a silver mate cloak from the royal wing. Clara pushed it away. My own clothes. They were entered with the deceased effects, Emmett said, then retrieved them from the property room. The effects are sealed as evidence. Clara met the examiner's eyes. Open them under witness. I will not leave my own funeral wearing his household colors. The examiner ordered the evidence seal opened. Clara's dark wool dress and winter shawl were returned under 2 witness marks. The sleeves smelled faintly of cedar from the mate wing wardrobe, a home already converted into an inventory of someone presumed gone. Felix spoke through the corridor channel. I remember that shawl. She fastened it slowly. You remember many things after someone places them beyond your reach. He did not answer. Before the litter moved, the examiner addressed Clara. The residual command may pull during transport if the royal wolf surges. We will monitor your pulse. If you lose consciousness, I can halt the carriage and stabilize you without using the bond. And if his wolf breaks restraint, the dampening team will answer it. Felix said, they will not call you back. Clara turned toward his chamber. You cannot promise what frightened men will do. I can place the order now. An order did this to me. Then I will make it a prohibition they cannot interpret. No healer, guard, continuity officer, or crown servant may access Clara's bond, even to preserve my life, without her recorded consent. The examiner entered it as a temporary royal restriction, subject to the plague court. Clara's voice softened from exhaustion, not forgiveness. If your wolf suffers, do not send me the suffering as proof that you love me. I will not. The service doors opened. Felix remained behind 2 walls of glass while the litter passed. He could see only the outline of Clara's face beneath the shawl. I heard your whole funeral, she said. His hand rose against the inner pane. I know. I heard you love me. His eyes closed, and I heard how far that love was willing to search. The litter moved before he could answer. At the outer passage, the residual command tightened beneath Clara's ribs. The monitoring cord snapped, taut as her pulse fell. Inside the dampening chamber, Felix's royal wolf struck the restraint door. The examiner ordered a second non-bonded draft. A guard shouted that the first restraint was splitting. Felix's voice carried through the alarm. Do not reopen her bond. The first restraint door buckled inward. The examiner ordered the second barred. No one called Clara back. By sunrise, Felix's royal wolf had bent 2 restraint doors and bloodied neither guard nor healer. Felix had ordered every weapon removed before the second door failed. Use another non-bonded draft, he said from inside the reinforced chamber. The senior dampening healer looked through the barred window. A 3rd dose may suppress your shift for days. Then I will spend days unable to shift. The bond could calm you faster. No one will speak that sentence again without Clara's consent. The 3rd draft left him shaking on the stone floor, but Clara's pulse remained stable in the oath-run infirmary beyond the palace walls. No one called her back. At midday, Felix ordered the royal council into the mourning howl chamber, the same place where he had begun Clara's funeral. He attended without ceremonial armor. Iron restraint bands remained around his wrists, secured loosely enough for movement but visibly enough that no one could mistake the condition of his wolf. Emmett Core stood beside the council recorder. The independent inquiry has not established who created the false declaration, he said. A public session may prejudice the evidence. Felix placed Clara's suspended death notice on the funeral table. I am not naming an author. Then what do you intend to establish? That I authorized a funeral without using the lawful procedure that would have shown she was alive. A council elder shifted uneasily. You relied upon certified plague records. I relied upon them after I had already noticed what they refused to answer. Emmett's expression remained composed. Your Majesty, accepting responsibility need not require releasing protected royal wolf records. It does if those records show why Clara's living bond was valuable to the crown. The wolf logs were brought into the chamber under independent seals. Felix ordered every surge, restraint failure, calming report, and unexplained recovery open to the plague court. He also surrendered crown confidentiality over the 6 emergency stabilization orders issued during his reign. On Elder Rose, those records may weaken confidence in the succession. They should. The word traveled farther in the chamber than his eulogy had. Felix continued, a kingdom that depends upon hiding the condition of its ruler has already made weakness someone else's burden. Emmett looked toward the independent examiner. Clara's medical records cannot be released without her authorization. They will not be. Felix had sent the request to Clara that morning. Her answer arrived under oath seal. Release only the pulse timings, extraction intervals, and false entries necessary to prove what was done. My illness is not public entertainment. Felix read the instruction aloud without adding to it. The examiner admitted only the portions Clara had authorized. For 3 nights, the council saw. Felix's wolf had surged and Clara's pulse had collapsed within the same quarter hour. The altered plague seal had answered the target's distress by drawing from its living source. The elder who had defended the funeral lowered his eyes. Felix did not permit the room to turn silence into innocence. You stood where I stood, he said. You accepted legal closure because the woman behind the seal was chronically ill, inconvenient to verify, and unable to contradict us. Emmett answered carefully. Some officers may have acted negligently. That does not establish a coordinated attempt to erase her. No, the inquiry will establish what can be proved. Felix placed another order beside the death notice. Until then, the Office of Royal Continuity loses independent access to mate, bond commands, emergency seals, and bonded source records. The Chief Scribal Office loses sole certification authority over quarantine deaths involving royal interests. Emmett's gaze settled on him. You are restricting 2 offices before guilt has been determined. I am restricting powers already shown, capable of operating without named responsibility. That may delay legitimate emergency action. Then legitimate action will learn to survive witnesses. The order transferred all relevant records to the independent plague court. Emmett was not arrested. He was required to submit his office roster, certification procedures, and communications with royal continuity. Felix then unsealed Clara's property inventory. Her winter rooms, personal accounts, clothing, correspondence, and inherited land were removed from crown reversion. Because she had been directly verified alive, the transfers had no lawful basis to continue. Her mate's status stayed pending Clara's own decision and the bond inquiry. When the order reached the oath-run infirmary, Clara read it from her bed. The independent healer asked, Do you wish to acknowledge receipt? Yes. Do you wish to send a message to the king? Clara looked at the returned property list. Tell him restoration is not a gift when the property was mine before he allowed them to call me dead. The healer hesitated. Anything else? Clara's fingers rested over the line naming her winter rooms. Ask whether he opened the wolf records before or after the council warned him it might cost the throne. Felix received the question in the mourning chamber. Before, he answered. Emmett watched him. And if the succession houses withdraw support? Felix removed the alpha seal from his hand and placed it beside Clara's death notice. They may examine a king who let his mate be used to conceal his weakness. The independent examiner opened the first continuity communication box. Inside lay the request that had sent Clara's forged consent attachment to the Chief Scribal Office. The request had not originated in royal continuity. It bore Emmett Corr's certification mark. Clara entered the mourning howl chamber on her own feet. The independent examiner walked beside her. Clara refused the litter at the threshold. I was carried out of my own death, she said. I will walk into the record that replaces it. The chamber still held the black funeral banners. Her sealed urn remained on the evidence table beside the suspended death notice. Felix stood below the council benches with restraint bands at his wrists and no alpha seal on his hand. He did not move toward her. Emmett Corr faced the inquiry from the opposite side of the room. Lady Clara's presence is medically unnecessary. Her testimony can be taken through sealed deposition. Clara stopped before her memorial portrait. My absence was the first evidence used against me. The examiner confirmed that Clara's fever remained active, but her condition allowed a limited appearance. Emmett inclined his head. Then the inquiry should remain limited to the disputed consent and continuity records. No. Clara took the death notice from the evidence table. The parchment declared her deceased, transferred, cremated, dispossessed, and severed from her mate bond. Each action had been entered before anyone looked through the observation grill. She tore the notice in half. My death declaration was suspended when I was found alive. I want the registry corrected in public. The senior oath judge looked to the examiner. Is her living status disputed? Her diagnosis remains under review. Her life does not. The judge restored Clara Dain to the living registry. Every property reversion, household termination, and posthumous transfer was declared void. The mate bond entry remained open. Felix looked at Clara. That decision belongs to her. Emmett replied. Mate status affects royal stability. Clara placed the torn notice before him. My bond may affect the throne. It is still mine. The judge entered the bond as held exclusively under Clara Dain's authority, pending her informed decision. Clara turned toward the pack representatives who had attended her funeral. You heard me declared dead because plague law allowed records to replace a living witness. How many others were buried behind seals no family could question? A council elder answered, Quarantine law prevents grief from breaking containment. It also prevented Felix from entering my ward, Clara said. It did not prevent him from requesting the grill. Felix stepped forward only far enough to be heard. I had that option. I did not use it. The funeral was authorized by me. Clara held his gaze. Do not make confession sound like protection. I will not. She submitted a petition drafted with the independent plague court. No quarantine death could be finalized without a living witness check through sealed glass or an independently recorded medical reason why such a check was impossible. No property could revert, and no mate bond could be entered as severed until verification occurred. Every sealed death involving Crown interest would receive outside review. Emmett read the provisions. You would place delay inside the most dangerous stage of an outbreak. I would place a witness inside it. Independent examiners may not be available in remote territories. Then train more. Do not solve scarcity by declaring the unseen dead. The judge accepted the petition for emergency consideration. Clara added, review every Hollowmoon quarantine death entered during the current outbreak. A murmur moved through the benches. My name was not the only one processed by these officers. I will not accept a correction designed only for the Alpha King's mate. Felix said, the Crown will fund the review. The Crown will submit to it. Funding is not control. Yes. The examiner opened the continuity communication bearing Emmett's certification mark. Emmett spoke before she read it. My mark confirms that royal continuity presented a qualifying succession threat and an attachment number. It does not certify Clara's signature. What time did you certify it? Clara asked. The examiner compared the entries. The scribal certification was recorded 37 minutes before the consent attachment entered continuity custody. Felix's eyes shifted to Emmett. You certified a document that did not yet exist. I certified the emergency file number assigned to it. Did you see Clara? The judge asked. No. Did you see the consent? No. Clara's voice remained quiet. Then you helped the Crown treat my agreement as present, before anyone had created the paper claiming it. Emmett remained composed. I accepted a continuity representation during a captive threat. That was standard procedure. His certification did not prove he forged Clara's mark or altered the seal. It proved he approved the command chain without seeing the source consent it claimed to contain. The judge removed the chief scribal office from control of Clara's records pending full inquiry. Clara looked at Felix. You may rebuild the registry, open every sealed file, and restrain your wolf without taking from me. He waited. But none of that purchases the bond you failed to protect. I know. The examiner unfolded the original continuity request beneath Emmett's certification. Its subject line had been written before the forged attachment existed. Preserve royal wolf stability after declared death. By the next moonrise, the Office of Royal Continuity had surrendered its sealed correspondence. The inquiry returned to the mourning howl chamber because Clara insisted truth be entered where her death had been announced. She stood beneath the funeral banners in her shawl. Felix remained below the alpha dais, restraint bands at his wrists. Emmett Core faced the judges beside the box bearing his certification mark. The independent examiner opened the first instruction. It had been sent from the chief scribal office to Royal Continuity 6 hours before Clara's false transfer. Royal stability threatened by mate incapacity. Prepare posthumous bond preservation if direct consent cannot be secured. The senior judge looked at Emmett. Did you write this? I approve the classification. Posthumous bond preservation requires the source to be dead. It requires the source to be legally unavailable. Clara gripped the witness table. I was in a ward with an observation grill. You were chronically ill, unconfirmed for moon plague, and unable to support the public duties of a royal mate. The Alpha's wolf had begun attacking its restraints. Continuity law required an answer. It required my consent. It required the kingdom to survive. Felix spoke from below the dais. You knew the living witness procedure had not been used. I knew the infirmary had certified transfer. You certified the consent file before it existed. I certified that continuity would provide the required attachment. The examiner opened the night duty registrar's statement. The registrar admitted receiving Emmett's classification, the emergency seal, and instructions to preserve the bond after death. He routed the command through Clara's plague seal. A continuity courier later filed the consent attachment supplied through the chief scribal office. The statement did not claim Emmett forged Clara's mark. The next document did. A scribal preparation sheet recorded Clara's personal mark, copied from an old property receipt. Beside it appeared Emmett's notation. Suitable for emergency attachment. Do not delay stabilization for unavailable witness. Clara looked at him. You made death the condition under which my refusal stopped mattering. Emmett answered with the composure he had brought to her funeral. I made the crown governable. No, Felix said. You made her disappearance useful to me. He faced the judges. I accepted the calm. I accepted sealed witnesses, a sealed urn, and a funeral completed without direct verification. Emmett constructed the lie. I gave it room to succeed. The examiner produced Clara's missing second moon plague result. No active moon plague had been detected. The sample showed severe bond depletion and fever requiring treatment, not cremation quarantine. Emmett's office had received the result before filing Clara's death notice. Why was it omitted? The judge asked. Emmett paused. Because releasing her would have ended the only stabilization method working on the royal wolf. The judges revoked Emmett's office, ordered him held for trial, and removed the chief scribal office from medical, quarantine, and mate bond certification. The continuity registrar and courier would face independent hearings. Felix placed 3 orders before the pack. The first abolished quarantine death declarations without an independent living witness check or recorded medical impossibility. The second prevented property, household standing, and bond status from changing before external verification. The third prohibited using bonded strength without the source's direct consent, independent medical necessity, and a named issuer. These laws remain if I lose the Alpha seal, he said. Several pack lords had petitioned for a fitness hearing over his wolf and its concealment. Felix submitted without objection. Clara's legal name, residence, property, correspondence, and living status were restored in full. At her request, the funeral record remained beside the registry as evidence of what procedure had allowed. The examiner approached her with the release plan. We can close your source route first while Felix remains under dampening restraint. The rebound risk will fall upon his wolf. Clara read every line before signing. This is my decision. Yes, the examiner replied. The command was severed under medical witness. Pain crossed Clara's ribs, then loosened for the first time in 6 nights. Across the chamber, Felix dropped to one knee as his wolf struck against the restraint inside him. He did not ask her to help. Clara waited until the healers confirmed he remained stable. Later, beneath dismantled funeral banners, he stood before her, without crown or bond claim. I loved you, he said, and still trusted a system that found your silence convenient. You also loved the peace my suffering gave your wolf. I did not know its source. You did not ask. No. She held his gaze. I will not comfort you for understanding too late. I will not ask you to. The bond is mine now. Whether it ever becomes ours again will not be decided by law, illness, fear, or your wolf. Felix bowed his head. Then I will live by whatever you choose. Clara looked toward the wall that had carried her howl into her own funeral. For now, you may write to me. You may answer every question I send. You may do the work without knowing whether it leads back to me. And if it does not, then the work was still owed. Clara left the mourning howl chamber through its doors, carrying her restored name and no promise except her own. Behind her, Felix remained beneath the record of the funeral he had allowed. Ahead of her, no wall held the right to decide whether she was alive.